My name is Gabriel Tenorio. I am a string maker, musician, producer, activist, and educator. I teach guitar at Corcoran and singing and songwriting at Chuckawalla Valley State Prisons. Through the Arts and Corrections program, I work for an organization called ACTA, the Alliance for California Traditional Artists. I practice many arts. I used to find it hard to say what my art is, and that is still revealing itself every day. My traditional practice involves making strings for instruments, specifically guitars. By learning to make strings for the traditional instruments I grew up playing, I reinvented how electric and acoustic steel guitar strings are formulated. I find myself looking at tradition as much as I'm looking at innovation. Without one, there isn't the other, and I like the idea of being connected through time and space through the practices we keep. I quit college to play music professionally. In between touring and recording, writing and performing, I fell into a lot of unplanned experiences that shaped the art of my life. I was a busboy and a waiter, a warehouse worker, a house painter, community organizer, an IT coordinator, a volunteer specialist, a grant writer, an international human rights activist, a local activist, TV music producer, a film score composer for an Oscar-nominated film, an art handler and art assistant, a ukulele teacher, the director of a major, historically significant arts organization. And throughout this, I've always been a teacher. Sometimes you'll find yourself in the middle of a lot of people willing to work together to make a moment. There is something almost religious about music to me. It's a form of meditation. I think all artistic practices are. There seems to be an art to every practice. There are also two sides to every art, the personal and the shared. There are the things we need to do for ourselves to keep our peace and balance. That is a lifelong process. And then there are the practices and experiences we share. I moved to Boyle Heights in 1979. Brooklyn Avenue reminded me of El Paso and Juarez. It took me a while before the new smell of this city wore off, and I realized that I was from here now. I drove all over LA with my stepfather. A lot. He was a contractor, a very good one, but he was also functionally illiterate. So like most first-generation boys my age, I worked alongside him. I read street names and newspapers, menus and contracts. It was important for me to build my workshop here because it keeps my string-making tradition alive, and alive in one of the birthplaces of Chicano and Mexican-American culture. Boyle Heights was already a Mexican neighborhood when the freeways were built in, on, over, through, surrounding, and cutting up Boyle Heights. Kids like me got to make do with what was left of it. We activated Boyle Heights. We gave it life and spirit every day. They said the people living here were diverse and subversive. I can't believe why they told us to get good, grow up, and get out, to rise above and never look back. It can be enchanting. It's a very real place. I enjoy how it wears its history on its sleeve, how it doesn't hide its years. I learned a long time ago that place was important, that it had meaning, history, energy, life. This place is always teasing my memory with the mirages and mirror images of real things left behind. You know, I can believe they told us those things. so that we would never feel like it was ours, that we belonged here. This is my workshop. I spend an equal amount of time here as I do anywhere else. I think space has a history, an energy, it has a spirit. It can be or become sacred. I'm learning how to cultivate my own space and make it work for me. My grandparents worked at home with their hands, each with their own individual workshop. I have my own workshop at home. I work from here because I want to keep close to my family, the way it was when I was really little in El Paso, when it was 10 of us or more living in a tiny house made of stone. This house had 8 kids, and this tiny garage was converted into a bedroom. I fill my space with so many things, like long breaths and flakes of skin, sleepless footsteps that pace in the night. I look for places to keep thoughts I want to forget for a while, to lose random keys to unmarked boxes on shelves, to fill the holes in the concrete with memories of random chatter. In between the cracks of things, between pages and sleeves, hanging from threads bare and exposed, and in the corners and recesses, the memories come looking for me.
Song is from Veracruz. It features David Hidalgo on the requinto jarocho and Luis Perez on the jarana and myself on the harp. And it's called Canelo.
I can't talk about my artistic practice and my jale without first acknowledging the work of Francisco Gonzalez and Jacob Hernandez. Francisco founded Guadalupe Custom Strings after leaving the band he started. They were just another band from East LA. He bought an old machine from a harp string maker. I learned and worked on that same machine for years. Francisco used to make my strings when I started playing. Francisco invented a new way of looking at strings from mariachi instruments that changed the way musicians played and builders made the instruments. The work took decades to develop, and the fear was that it could close and that the strings so many people came to depend upon, including me, would disappear. I mean, before Francisco, it was impossible to get what you needed. We looked at it the way Francisco showed us. It's a tradition, it's something you work at every day, but we freed ourselves to reimagine how we did everything. We had freedom, and that required discipline. I know I dedicated myself to learning every aspect of our string-making business, and no one in the shop had time to make my strings, so I had to learn to make them on my own. I took a deep breath and did it. I don't think I looked back after that. Making good strings became a passion. I had the experience of touring and recording. I was doing research on metals, comparing weight, density, reading up on historical uses of metals and how they evolved. like silver, copper, brass, bronze, nickel, molybdenum, steel, you name it. Francisco had always warned us not to get lost in the weeds of theory and math. You can get married to a theory and blind yourself to discovery and learning. It's a question of putting your hands, fingers, and ears to work. Trial and error sounds tedious. It's more than that. I wasn't making strings until I really started understanding why they worked. I got to work testing out my sets on different guitars. I called on guitarists and builders to also test for me. I worked morning, day, and night, weekends, making strings and testing them out. Once professional session and touring musicians heard about what I was doing, and they began to spread the word, I found myself completely immersed in a different part of the music world.
They're made by Gabriel Tenorio in Los Angeles. It's called the Gabriel Tenorio String Company, GTS. He's an amazing one-man shop. Wow. And he winds every string by hand. Really? And he's obsessive about things like string tension. So he'll really mess around with what the rap is versus what the core is.
After starting up, my strings were regarded as one of the top 3 in the world. A lot of people didn't realize it was this one Mexican guy from Boyle Heights. That's when I realized people were paying attention, and the work was making an impact. I love the sound of the guitar and different guitars and guitarists. Each guitar has a different feel and sound and purpose. If I can sit down and listen to someone play, watch their hands, their shoulders, I'll listen to what tendencies they might have in terms of tone choice. I mean, it's like clothing. My grandmother used to make wedding dresses by hand. And it's that kind of attention to detail and fit and form that I have. That same consideration of how someone is going to move and how comfortable are they going to be using my strings. I take measurements, but I don't get lost in calculations. I've made so many sets by now that there's kind of a second nature to understanding how to gauge them out. And your big American companies didn't have a good understanding of Mexican instruments or how they sound, how they are played, or how mariachis and norteños even work for a living. My strings are to help the guitarist get the greatest return for their effort, and for the builder to achieve the best sounding and playing instrument possible. At every moment, my work is an expression of art, and it's an expression of every art making experience. I started getting chronic pain in my hands the very first time I went on tour. I was 19. While my hands were beginning to fail, they would stiffen while playing, and it was frightening. I mean, over time, my condition has worsened faster and faster. Because of the pain, I knew I would soon give up playing professionally. And that was almost 10 years ago. Those experiences inform what I do today. I started thinking about how important it was to address things like physical disability. We all have to build calluses, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the kind of pain that changes your way of thinking, that it affects you emotionally, and feels ever imposing. I often get requests from guitarists saying they had an injury, or just getting too old, and they just really want to keep on playing. I feel that. I'm going through that too. I also knew I had a new calling with my strings. And I do find it strange that I feel like I'm losing my sight, some hearing, and some dexterity, but I feel I understand more, and I'm using my other senses in very important ways that are satisfying both mentally and creatively. Language is very much related to how we think, how we perceive the world and ourselves. It can shape our self-image. Language is powerful. We use language to connect spiritually, to pray, for example. We use language to sing the exaltations of love and ecstasy. We use language to share meaning and create power. At the base of songwriting and poetry is language. But we have to challenge the mind to use those elements creatively. And that involves breaking down limits, walls that we've put up over time. Let's just say it is one thing to be like a bird. It is another to be the bird. Music in nature is participatory and collaborative in its essence. It is indeed one of those practices that is at the core of our humanity and our culture. The power of the written or spoken or sung word, the power of poetry and verse, manifests in the reader always. It breathes life into the imagination of the reader or listener, and it lives on as a thing that exists in time and space, if for just a moment. These practices that bring people together and strengthen human bonds are indeed the building blocks for community. A community is people working collaboratively, and that means everyone needs to have access to those cultural practices that are collaborative. That is the embrace of the community. The people you meet in prison are my community. I once met a musician who introduced himself this way. My name is Gabriel Tenorio, and I practice the healing art of music. And that was one of the greatest things I ever heard, and I never forget that. It's a healing art, and it's a practice. We do it day in and day out. I'm learning to have a practice that is for me, that isn't a vocation, that isn't a jale, something called praxis. The bit of gardening I get to do every day not only activates this space I'm cultivating, but it generates a sense of peace within me and with my environment. Those small but very regular creative practices make a real difference in our lives over a lifetime.